Marcus Reed woke up at 5:30 a.m., just like he did every morning. The 17-year-old boy moved quietly through his small bedroom, careful not to make noise. His parents and younger sister were still asleep. Outside, the neighborhood was dark and peaceful. Marcus put on his workout clothes and went to the backyard. The morning air felt cool on his skin. He started his daily routine with 50 push-ups, then 50 sit-ups. His body moved with ease, showing years of training. After finishing his exercises, Marcus sat cross-legged on the grass and closed his eyes to meditate for 15 minutes. This had been his morning routine for almost 9 years now. It started when he was only 8 years old, after a group of older boys had pushed him around at school. Marcus came home with a black eye and torn shirt. His father, James Reed, decided something needed to change. "You don't need to fight," his father had told him, "but you need to know how to defend yourself and others." The next day, James took Marcus to Coach Rees's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. The gym was small but clean, with blue mats covering the floor and pictures of champions on the walls. Coach Rees was a serious man with kind eyes. He spoke softly, but everyone listened when he talked. Jiu-Jitsu is not about hurting people, Coach Rees explained to young Marcus on that first day. It's about protecting yourself using your opponent's energy against them. It teaches discipline, respect, and control. Now, 9 years later, Marcus had earned his brown belt. He had won 3 regional tournaments and helped Coach Rees teach the younger students. Everyone at the gym respected him, but at school, hardly anyone knew about his skills. Marcus never talked about his training or his abilities. He was just the quiet kid who got good grades and helped at his family's bookstore after school. After his morning routine, Marcus took a quick shower and got ready for school. He made himself a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, packed his lunch, and prepared breakfast for his sister, Lily, who would wake up soon. His mother, Sarah, came into the kitchen as Marcus was finishing up. "Early as always," she said with a smile, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Don't forget you have training today after school." "I won't forget," Marcus answered, "and I'll be at the bookstore by 6 to help Dad with the new delivery." Sarah looked at her son with pride. At 17, Marcus showed more responsibility than most adults she knew. His training had shaped him into a disciplined and respectful young man. Marcus grabbed his backpack and headed out. He preferred to walk to school, using the time to clear his mind and prepare for the day ahead. The 30-minute walk took him through quiet streets that slowly came to life as the sun rose higher. At school, Marcus moved through his classes quietly. He got along well with most students but didn't have many close friends. His best friend, David, was the only person who knew about Marcus's jiu-jitsu training. They had known each other since they were little kids, long before Marcus started training. "We still on for studying at the library after your training?" David asked during lunch. "Yeah," Marcus nodded. "I'll meet you there around 5. After school ended, Marcus headed straight to Coach Rees's gym. The familiar smell of the mats and the sound of students training made him feel at home. Coach Rees nodded at him as he entered. "Marcus, good timing," Coach said. "I need your help with the new students today." Marcus smiled and bowed slightly. "Yes, Coach." As he changed into his guy, Marcus felt grateful for the path his life had taken. He never imagined that his training would be tested outside the gym. But life has a way of surprising even the most prepared people, and Marcus's biggest test was coming sooner than he thought. Marcus finished his training at Coach Rees's gym feeling tired but happy. He had helped teach the newer students some basic moves and then practiced his own advanced techniques with other brown belts. After a quick shower, he changed into his regular clothes and said goodbye to Coach Rees. "Good work today, Marcus," Coach Rees said, patting him on the shoulder. "Your control is getting better each day." Marcus smiled and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Coach." It was almost 5 o'clock. Marcus had promised to meet David at the library to study for their math test. Usually, Marcus took the main road to the library, but today he decided to take a shortcut through Riverdale Park. The park would save him about 15 minutes, and he didn't want to keep David waiting. Marcus got on his bike and started pedaling. The afternoon sun felt warm on his back as he rode down the quiet streets. When he reached Riverdale Park, he slowed down a bit. Something felt different today. The park had always been a nice place where families had picnics and kids played on the swings. But lately, Marcus had heard stories about a group calling themselves the Road Demons. They were bikers who had started hanging around the park, making people feel uncomfortable. Marcus considered turning around and taking the longer route, but he was already running late. He decided to just ride through quickly and keep to himself. As he pedaled along the path that cut through the middle of the park, Marcus noticed 3 men with motorcycles parked near the basketball courts. They wore black leather jackets with patches on the back showing a skull with flames. The men were drinking from bottles in paper bags and laughing loudly. Marcus kept his eyes forward and pedaled a little faster. He was about halfway through the park when he heard a clicking sound from his bike. The chain had come loose. "No, not now," Marcus muttered to himself. He stopped and got off his bike, kneeling down to look at the chain. While Marcus was fixing his bike, the 3 bikers noticed him. The tallest one nudged his friends and pointed at Marcus. They started walking toward him, their heavy boots crunching on the gravel path. Marcus sensed them coming before he saw them. His training had made him very aware of his surroundings. He took a deep breath and kept working on his bike chain, hoping they would just walk past him. "Hey, kid, nice bike you got there," a deep voice called out. Marcus looked up to see the 3 bikers standing in front of him. The one who had spoken was a tall man with a shaved head and a thick beard. His arms were covered in tattoos, and he had a scar running down his left cheek. The name patch on his jacket read Ray. The other 2 men stood slightly behind Ray. One was shorter but muscular, with a red bandana tied around his head. His patch said, Vince. The 3rd man was heavy-set with a long ponytail and sunglasses. His jacket identified him as Denny. Marcus stood up slowly, keeping his bike between himself and the men. "Thanks," he said simply, trying to be polite but not engage too much. Ray walked around the bike, looking at it with exaggerated interest. "Must have cost a lot. What else you got in that backpack? Anything good?" "Just school books," Marcus answered, his voice calm even though his heart was beating faster. Vince, the shorter one, laughed. "School books. Hear that, Ray? We got ourselves a smart kid." Marcus sensed the danger growing. These men weren't just being unfriendly, they were looking for trouble. He quickly finished fixing his chain and stood up straight. "I need to go now. My friend is waiting for me," Marcus said, trying to move past them. Ray stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Not so fast, smart kid. We're not done talking yet." The 3 men formed a half circle around Marcus, cutting off his escape routes. People who might have helped were too far away to notice what was happening, hidden by trees and bushes. Marcus realized he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. His years of training had prepared him for moments like this, but he had never wanted to use his skills outside the gym. Now, it seemed like he might not have a choice. Marcus stood calmly, though his mind was racing. The 3 bikers had formed a tight circle around him. Escape routes were limited. Behind him was a thick cluster of bushes, and in front of him stood Ray, the leader, with his 2 friends on either side. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Marcus said quietly. He remembered Coach Ray's first rule: always try to avoid conflict. Ray laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty part of the park. "Too bad, kid. Trouble found you anyway." He pointed at Marcus's backpack. "Hand it over. We'll see if there's anything useful in there." Marcus held the straps of his backpack tighter. Inside were his school books, his wallet with 2 weeks of saved allowance, and his phone. But it wasn't about the items. Coach Ray had taught him that giving in to bullies only encourages them. "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm not giving you my backpack." The 3 men looked surprised. People usually gave them what they wanted right away. "What did you say?" Vince, the shorter biker, stepped forward with his fists clenched. "I said no," Marcus repeated, still calm. He shifted his stance slightly, nothing obvious, just a small adjustment to his footing that would give him better balance if they attacked. Ray's face turned red with anger. He wasn't used to being refused, especially by a teenager. "You think you're tough, kid?" He poked Marcus hard in the chest. "Do you know who we are? We're the Road Demons. Everyone in this neighborhood knows not to mess with us." Marcus took a deep breath. "I don't care who you are. I'm asking you politely to let me pass." Denny, the large man with the ponytail, laughed and nudged Vince. "Kid's got guts, I'll give him that." Ray wasn't amused. He grabbed the front of Marcus's shirt and pulled him closer. "Listen, smart mouth. Either you hand over that backpack right now, or we'll take it and teach you a lesson you won't forget." Marcus could smell beer on Ray's breath. He knew the situation was getting worse by the second. He noticed Ray's grip, the position of his feet, and the way his weight was distributed. Years of training had taught Marcus to see these details instantly. "Last chance," Marcus said, his voice still even. "Let me go now." Ray responded by shoving Marcus backward hard. Marcus allowed himself to stumble back 2 steps but stayed on his feet. He could have kept his balance perfectly, but he didn't want to reveal his skills yet. "Get his bag," Ray ordered his friends. Vince moved first, rushing forward to grab the backpack. Marcus sidestepped smoothly, causing Vince to grab at empty air. The move looked almost casual, as if Marcus had simply moved out of the way by luck. "Stay still, you little." Vince lunged again, this time swinging his fist at Marcus's face. This was no longer about intimidation. Vince was trying to hurt him. In that moment, Marcus made his decision. Coach Reyes had always said, "You have the right to defend yourself when there is no other option." With precision that came from thousands of hours of practice, Marcus blocked Vince's punch. The biker's fist hit nothing but air, and the force of his own swing threw him off balance. The other 2 bikers stared in surprise. They had expected the teenager to cower in fear or try to run. Instead, he had moved with unexpected confidence. "What the?" Ray started to say. Marcus cut him off. "I don't want to fight you, but I will defend myself if you make me." There was something in Marcus's voice, a quiet certainty, that made Ray hesitate for just a second. But his pride was hurt, and he couldn't back down in front of his friends. "Get him," Ray ordered, and all 3 bikers moved toward Marcus at once. The peaceful afternoon in Riverdale Park was about to change dramatically. Marcus took a deep breath and centered himself, just as he did before every sparring match. But this wasn't the gym with its soft mats and rules. This was real, and the stakes were much higher. Time seemed to slow down for Marcus as the 3 bikers moved toward him. His training took over, and he noticed everything: Ray's wide stance, Vince's angry breathing, Denny's hesitant steps. Coach Reyes had drilled him for years on how to handle multiple attackers. Remember, Coach Reyes had told him, "If you must fight, position yourself so they can't all reach you at once." Marcus stepped back quickly, placing himself so a large tree was partly behind him. Now the bikers could only come at him from the front and sides, not from all directions. Vince reached him first, throwing the wild punch aimed at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked easily under the swing. The movement was so smooth that it looked like he had barely moved at all. Vince stumbled forward, surprised to hit nothing but air. "Stand still," Vince shouted, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Ray came next, trying to grab Marcus's arms. Marcus twisted away from Ray's grip using a basic escape technique that Coach Reyes taught to beginners. He made it look simple, almost accidental, as if Ray had just missed his hold. The bikers were getting frustrated. They had expected an easy target, a scared teenager who would hand over his belongings and maybe run away crying. Instead, this kid was somehow avoiding their attacks without even seeming afraid. "What's going on?" Denny asked, confusion clear on his face. "Just grab him." Ray tried again, lunging forward to tackle Marcus. This time, Marcus couldn't avoid contact completely. Ray's shoulder hit him in the chest, pushing him back against the tree. Pain shot through Marcus's back as it scraped against the rough bark. For a brief moment, Ray had Marcus pinned. He grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Got you now, kid," he growled. But Marcus wasn't worried. Being pinned was something he dealt with every day in training. With a technique he had practiced thousands of times, Marcus shifted his weight and created space between them. Then, using Ray's own pressure against him, Marcus slipped out from between Ray and the tree. Ray stumbled forward, hitting his own shoulder against the tree trunk. He turned around, shock and anger on his face. "What the hell? How did you?" Marcus stood a few feet away now, his stance balanced and ready. He hadn't thrown a single punch or kick. So far, he had only defended himself, just as Coach Reyes had taught him. "I don't want to hurt you," Marcus said clearly, "but I will if I have to. This is your last warning. Leave me alone." The 3 bikers looked at each other, unsure what to do. This wasn't going as planned. But Ray was too proud to back down now, especially in front of his friends. "You think you're some kind of kung fu master?" Ray mocked, though his voice had less confidence than before. "There are 3 of us and 1 of you. You got lucky dodging a few punches. That's all. Marcus didn't respond to the taunt. Coach Reyes had always told him that real fighters don't need to boast or argue. Ray reached into his pocket and pulled out something that caught the sunlight. A small knife with a 3-inch blade. "Let's see you dodge this," Ray said, his voice low and threatening. Marcus felt his heart beat faster. This had just become much more dangerous. He had trained against knife attacks, but those were with rubber training knives, not real ones that could cause serious harm. "You don't need to do this," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady despite his fear. "Using that knife will only get you into serious trouble." Vince and Denny looked nervous now. They had expected to scare a kid and take his stuff, not to be part of an armed assault. "Ray, maybe we should just go," Denny suggested quietly. "This isn't worth it." "Shut up," Ray snapped at his friend. "No teenager makes a fool of me, not in my park." Marcus knew this was the moment when everything would change. Either Ray would listen to reason and back down, or Marcus would have to use his full training to defend himself against an armed attacker. The knife glinted in the afternoon sun as Ray stepped forward. Ray moved forward with the knife pointed at Marcus. The blade made small circles in the air as Ray tried to look threatening. Marcus took slow, careful steps backward, keeping his eyes on the knife. "Nowhere to run now," Ray said with an ugly smile. Behind him, Vince looked excited, but Denny seemed worried. Marcus remembered Coach Reyes's lessons about knife defense. "Distance is your friend," Coach had said. "Only engage when you have no other choice." Marcus looked around quickly. The park path behind him was clear. He could turn and run. He was young and fit. He could probably outrun these older men, but that would mean leaving his bike behind. More importantly, running away might encourage these men to threaten other people in the future. Ray lunged forward suddenly, slashing the knife through the air. Marcus jumped back just in time, feeling the air move as the blade passed inches from his chest. This was no longer about his backpack. Ray meant to hurt him. "That's enough," Marcus said, his voice firm. He shifted his stance, placing his feet shoulder-width apart. His hands came up in front of him, not in fists, but open and ready. Ray laughed. "Look at this. The kid thinks he's a fighter." He turned to his friends. "Vince, grab him from behind while I teach him a lesson." Vince moved to circle around Marcus. Marcus knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had tried to avoid the fight, had given them warnings, but now he had to defend himself. As Vince rushed at him from the side, Marcus turned smoothly. Years of training took over. He caught Vince's arm, stepped to the side, and used Vince's own momentum to throw him. It was a basic hip throw, one of the first moves Coach Reyes had taught him. Vince flew through the air and landed hard on his back on the dirt path. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and he lay there gasping for breath. Ray and Denny froze, their mouths open in shock. What had just happened looked like something from an action movie, but Marcus had made it seem effortless. "What the?" Ray began, but Marcus didn't give him time to finish. With Vince temporarily out of the fight, Marcus moved toward Ray. The knife was still the biggest danger. Ray slashed wildly at him, but his movements were clumsy and predictable. Marcus stepped inside Ray's reach, grabbed his wrist, and applied pressure to a specific point that Coach Reyes had shown him. Ray's fingers opened involuntarily, and the knife fell to the ground. Before Ray could react, Marcus swept his leg, sending the bigger man crashing down next to his friend Vince. Denny stood alone now, looking from his fallen friends to the teenager who had put them there. For a big man, Denny moved surprisingly quickly, but in the wrong direction. He turned and ran back toward the motorcycles, leaving his friends behind. Marcus kicked the knife away into the bushes where no one could reach it easily. Ray was already trying to get up, anger and disbelief on his face. "Stay down," Marcus said firmly. "I don't want to hurt you more than I have to." Ray ignored the warning and charged at Marcus like an angry bull. Marcus sidestepped and used a simple shoulder throw. This time, Ray landed even harder than Vince had, the air rushing from his lungs with a painful sound. Marcus stood between the two fallen bikers, calm but alert. Neither man was seriously hurt. Marcus had been careful about that. He had used just enough force to stop them, not to cause lasting damage. Vince was sitting up now, holding his side and breathing heavily. "Who are you?" he asked, fear replacing the earlier anger in his voice. Before Marcus could answer, a new voice called out from the park path. "Hey, what's going on over there?" Marcus turned to see two park workers in green uniforms hurrying toward them. One was holding a radio, probably calling for help. For the first time since the confrontation began, Marcus felt relief wash over him. The danger was passing, but he knew this situation was far from over. The two park workers jogged toward the scene, their green uniforms bright against the trees. The older worker, a man with gray hair and a thick mustache, held a radio in his hand. The younger one, barely older than Marcus, looked nervous but determined. "I've called the police," the older worker announced. "They're on their way." He surveyed the scene. Two men on the ground, a teenager standing calmly, and what looked like a knife glinting in the bushes nearby. Ray struggled to his feet, holding his side where he had landed hard on the ground. "This kid attacked us," he shouted, pointing at Marcus. "We were just passing through the park." The older park worker raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because from where we were standing, it looked like you had a knife." Vince was still sitting on the ground, looking defeated. He knew they were in trouble now. "Ray, just shut up," he muttered. "We're already in enough trouble." The younger park worker moved closer to Marcus. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm fine. They tried to take my backpack, and then he pulled out a knife." He pointed toward the bushes where the knife had fallen. The older worker spoke into his radio again, updating the police on the situation. Then he turned to Ray and Vince. "You two stay right where you are until the police arrive. Don't even think about running." Ray's face darkened with anger. He glanced at his motorcycle, clearly thinking about escaping. But the older park worker stepped into his path. "Don't," he warned. "That would only make things worse for you." Marcus picked up his bike, which had fallen over during the confrontation. The chain had come off again, and the handlebars were twisted slightly. He began to fix it quietly while everyone waited for the police. "Where's the third guy?" the younger worker asked, looking around. "He ran away," Marcus explained, pointing in the direction Denny had fled. There were 3 of them at first. 5 tense minutes passed before they heard sirens in the distance. The sound grew louder until 2 police cars pulled up at the park entrance. 4 officers walked quickly down the path toward them. The first officer, a tall woman with short black hair, took control of the situation immediately. "I'm Officer Powell," she introduced herself. Then she turned to her partners. "Secure those 2, she ordered, pointing at Ray and Vince. 2 officers moved Ray and Vince away from the others. They searched them carefully and then had them sit on a park bench under supervision. Officer Powell turned to Marcus. "Can you tell me what happened here?" Marcus explained everything from the beginning. How he was taking a shortcut through the park, how his bike chain broke, and how the 3 men approached him and demanded his backpack. He described how he had tried to avoid the fight, only using his training when Ray pulled out the knife. "Training?" Officer Powell asked, looking interested. "I study Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu," Marcus explained. "I've been training for 9 years. I only used enough force to stop them. I didn't want to hurt them." The park workers confirmed what they had seen, describing how they had noticed the confrontation from a distance and had seen Ray with the knife. One of the other officers found the knife in the bushes and carefully placed it in an evidence bag. "This matches the description of a weapon used in 2 robberies last month," he told Officer Powell. Ray and Vince were handcuffed and led to the police cars. As they passed Marcus, Ray glared at him with hatred in his eyes. But Vince looked different, almost thoughtful, as if he was seeing Marcus clearly for the first time. "What happens now?" Marcus asked Officer Powell. "We'll need you to come to the station to make a formal statement," she explained. "And we'll need to contact your parents." Marcus nodded. He knew his parents would be worried when they heard what had happened, but he also knew they would understand that he had done the right thing. He had defended himself without causing unnecessary harm, just as Coach Race had taught him. "Can I call my coach too?" Marcus asked. "You'll want to know what happened." 3 hours later, Marcus sat in the police station with his parents on either side of him. His father, James, had his arm around Marcus's shoulders. His mother, Sarah, held his hand tightly. They had listened carefully as Marcus told his story to the police. "You did exactly what you needed to do," James told his son proudly. "You tried to avoid the fight. You gave them warnings. You only used your training when you had no other choice." Officer Powell entered the room with a folder in her hand. She sat across from the Reed family and smiled at Marcus. Good news, she said. The park workers' statements match yours completely. We also found out that Ray and Vince have been in trouble before. They were already wanted for questioning about other incidents in the park. Sarah looked worried. What about the third man, the one who ran away? We're looking for him, Officer Powell assured her. Based on your description, we think we know who he is. He won't get far. Marcus had been quiet, thinking about everything that had happened. Will I get in trouble? He finally asked. For fighting? Officer Powell shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. This was clearly self-defense. You had every right to protect yourself, especially when they pulled a weapon. Just then, the door opened and Coach Reyes walked in. His face showed relief when he saw that Marcus was okay. Coach. Marcus stood up to greet his mentor. Coach Reyes put his hands on Marcus's shoulders, looking him over carefully. Are you hurt anywhere? He asked with concern. No, I'm fine, Marcus assured him. I used the techniques you taught me. The hip throw worked perfectly. Coach Reyes nodded, pride clear in his eyes. I always hoped you would never need to use your training in a real situation, but I'm glad you were prepared when it happened. Officer Powell asked Coach Reyes a few questions about Marcus's training and his character. Coach answered confidently, describing Marcus as one of his most disciplined and respectful students. After a few more questions, Officer Powell closed her folder. I think we have everything we need for now. You can all go home. We'll contact you if we need anything else. As they walked out of the police station, Marcus was surprised to see David waiting in the lobby. His friend rushed toward him. Marcus, are you okay? I waited at the library for hours. Then I saw on social media that something happened in the park. Marcus smiled at his friend's concern. I'm fine. Just got delayed by some trouble. David's eyes widened. The rumors are true then. Someone said a teenager took down 2 bikers using martial arts. That was you. Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with messages. News traveled fast in their small town, and many of his classmates had already heard something about the incident. Most of the messages were from people he barely talked to at school, suddenly curious about the quiet kid they had ignored. This is going to be weird, Marcus said quietly to his parents. Everyone's going to look at me differently now. Sarah gave her son a reassuring smile. Just be yourself. The people who matter already know who you are. When they got home, Marcus was tired but couldn't sleep. He sat on his bed, thinking about the events of the day. He had always trained for situations like this, but the reality had been different from practice. The fear, the adrenaline, the split-second decisions. It had all happened so fast. His phone buzzed again. It was Coach Reyes. Training tomorrow, or you need a day off? The message read. Marcus smiled and replied immediately. I'll be there. Same time as always. He knew that nothing had really changed. He was still the same person, a student, a son, a martial artist who believed in discipline and respect. What happened today didn't define him. It was just one moment in his life. The most important thing was how he chose to move forward. As Marcus finally drifted off to sleep, he felt grateful for his training, not just for the physical skills it had given him, but for the mental strength to handle challenging situations with calm and control. 2 weeks passed since the incident in the park. Life had almost returned to normal for Marcus, though things had changed in small ways. Some classmates who had never spoken to him before now wanted to hear the story. Others asked if he could teach them some moves. Marcus politely declined the attention, preferring to keep his training separate from school. The park was safe again. Police had increased their patrols, and the road demons no longer gathered there. Denning had been caught 3 days after the incident, trying to leave town. All 3 bikers were facing charges for attempted robbery and assault. One Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was helping Coach Reyes clean the gym after class. They had just finished wiping down the mats when the front door opened. Marcus looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable and out of place, was Vince. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, immediately moving into a defensive stance. Coach Reyes stepped forward protectively. Can I help you? He asked the visitor in a firm voice. Vince held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He looked different from the last time Marcus had seen him. His red bandana was gone, and he wore simple jeans and a plain gray t-shirt instead of his leather jacket. I'm not here for trouble, Vince said quietly. I wanted to talk to him. He nodded toward Marcus. Coach Reyes looked at Marcus. It's your call. You want to hear what he has to say? Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He was curious. It's okay, coach. But stay close, please. Vince stepped into the gym, looking around at the equipment and the pictures on the walls. So this is where you learned all that stuff, he said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. Why are you here? Marcus asked again. Shouldn't you be in jail? Got out on bail yesterday, Vince explained. My court date is next month. He took a deep breath. Look, I came to say I'm sorry. What we did was wrong. We've been doing wrong things for a long time. Marcus was surprised. This was not what he had expected. Vince continued. When the judge was setting bail, he gave me a choice. I could either wait for trial in jail, or I could join this program. It's for anger management and life skills. I chose the program. That's good, Marcus said, unsure how to respond. Yesterday was my first session, Vince said. The counselor asked us to think about someone we had hurt and consider apologizing. You were the first person I thought of. Coach Reyes watched carefully but remained silent, letting the two work through this moment. When you took me down that day, Vince said, it was like waking up. No one had ever stood up to us before. Everyone was always scared, but you weren't. You were calm, even when we were threatening you. Marcus nodded slowly. My coach taught me that fear makes you react without thinking. Staying calm lets you make better decisions. Vince looked at Coach Reyes with newfound respect. You taught him well. Then he turned back to Marcus. I'm not asking for forgiveness or anything. I just wanted you to know that, well, that day changed something for me, made me think about the path I was on. There was an awkward silence before Vince spoke again. Anyway, that's all I came to say. He turned to leave. Wait, Marcus called. Vince stopped and looked back. Are you serious about changing? Marcus asked. Vince nodded. Yeah, I think I am. Marcus looked at Coach Reyes, who gave him a small nod of understanding. We have beginner classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5, Marcus said. If you're really serious about a new path, maybe this could be part of it. Vince looked shocked. You let me train here? After what I did? Coach Reyes stepped forward. Everyone deserves a second chance if they're truly committed to change. But in this gym, we value respect, discipline, and hard work. If you can commit to those values, you're welcome to try a class. Vince stood straighter, understanding the significance of what was being offered. I'd like that. Thank you. As Vince left, Coach Reyes put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. That was generous of you, he said. Marcus watched Vince walk away through the gym window. You always say that jiu-jitsu isn't just about fighting. It's about growing as a person. Maybe he needs that too. Coach Reyes smiled proudly. You understand the true spirit of what we do here. Sometimes the most unexpected people find their way to this path, and sometimes the most difficult confrontations lead to the most meaningful growth.